JD, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for the opportunity. I know I didn't even mention my name yet, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for the
Absolutely.
opportunity to be here. I know you are the type of person that I could probably talk to throughout the entire
Yeah.
day. I just looked at the clock. We've been rolling for some time, so I just wanted to say thank you for
That's
this
all right.
opportunity. And to everyone out there, my name is Matt Labrie. Very, very grateful for this opportunity once again. I am just a born and raised New Yorker who inevitably caught the hustler spirit that fills my hometown streets. Someone that has had immense polarities in life of the highs and the lows. Very, very deep lows, which do catapult you into very, very high highs.
Yeah.
And being able to try and surf those waves is the best way to describe who I am in the shortest form. So this conversation can go in many which ways, and I'm excited to see where we go from here.
Awesome, awesome, Matt. So tell me, where's the story begin then?
The story begins in a household with two parents that were trying to do their best, but ultimately their best wasn't what I needed. Now, I can actually backtrack and say that it was what I needed if we're talking about divine plans here, but what I needed wasn't met. And at that time, it was feeling neglected. And of course, I didn't know this growing up, but the emotional needs weren't met. I felt like I
Yeah.
was being pushed away by my mother. I felt like I was trying to be lived through by my father, and that led me down what I would potentially consider a course of destruction. We're talking about acting out in the most immature ways just to ensure that I was receiving the attention that was necessary for me at that
Mm.
point. And that, led to the principal's office often, just because that would get the phone home or the phone call to mom to make sure
Yeah.
she knows that I'm there while I'm sitting there laughing. My principal's calling me a brazen little thing. I'll never forget that term.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
and that just continued to develop. It led to not getting accepted into any high schools here in New York City, which you're essentially zoned to a public school. I went
Yeah.
to private school my whole life. That's what my parents wanted me to do, but I never got accepted into them. This is after my parents got divorced, but they were still working together to ensure that I had a good life, a great life at that. But luckily, I had athletic abilities that led me to get in. But lo and behold, I got kicked out. Went to another school, got kicked
Okay.
out, got arrested, lost my dream of playing professional sports when I had a pretty severe injury. Went to college, failed out of college, blew life savings just trying to maintain a certain image to feed the ego and make sure people viewed me a certain way.
Yeah.
And these are all the lows, right? There's many highs, but these are the lows and what's transpired over the course of time. And ultimately, I'm very grateful for this. Life brought me to a juncture where I had to get hit by the 2x4 of life, JD. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
you've experienced that, but I'm curious if you have. You ever felt
No,
that 2x4?
I don't necessarily call it the two by four, but I like there's just the universe in my opinion. And I always tell people that the universe slaps you hard in the face once in your life,
Mm,
and you have two choices at that point. You either go and say, okay, I felt that and I heard it. I'm paying attention now, or your choice is to not acknowledge that and just say, all right, I'm going to keep going what I'm doing. And that's not to say that second chances don't come around, but they're not going to be as obvious, in my opinion. So no, I have different metaphor, but
yeah,
no, same belief. Absolutely.
yeah. That 2x4 definitely woke me up. And while, just talking out loud here, I just want to point out while I may be elaborating on the quote unquote low moments for the purpose of creating some sort of resonation with those that are listening, maybe we don't have the same exact experience,
Absolutely.
identical. That I do want to make sure that I'm saying that and also shine a light on how these things may not have necessarily served me long term. They did serve me short term.
Yeah.
Give you an example. I very much so was under the impression that money was going to heal the pain that I felt.
Sure. Right.
I very much so was under that impression. And you want to know what? To an extent, it did. To an extent, it
Yeah.
did. I'll never forget. I was in college. I failed out. I went, like I said, I went to private school my whole life. You go to school, you go to college. No one's calling mom and dad to let you know you're
No.
not in class.
Nope. You're
So
it.
I
You're
got
on
a
your
little,
own.
I got trigger happy with that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
didn't understand the rule that you miss more than 3 classes, you automatically fail.
That's it,
So,
right?
uh, well, I did that, and I'll never forget this. At that moment, I failed out of college. My mother was battling cancer, and this was really the start to the turning point. But I had all of this pain from everything. Getting arrested. I was betrayed by one of my best friends at the time, or felt like I was betrayed. All of that neglect that really built up over the course of time. I had a mother who, and I still have a mother, by the way, and I'm very grateful for that. She constantly threatened me with sending me off to military school. That would make a kid really feel like you don't want him,
You don't
you
want them,
know?
yeah.
Exactly. So I had all of this pain that was numbed. I just kept moving from life experience to life experience. And then as I'm making all of this money when I failed out of college, and I'm very blessed and grateful for the opportunities I had, it dawned on me 3 words forever shifted my life. And those 3 words were simple: legacy over currency. And in that moment, I'll never forget, I was sitting at a friend's restaurant. He was the executive chef of his own restaurant, doing very well for himself. We were sitting, and very transparently, we were sitting in the restaurant after close, smoking a joint. And I pulled up this YouTube video, and this is many moons ago, before YouTube was as big as it is today. And I showed him this video, and it dawned on me. And I said, you know what? I'm not living to that. I'm not. Like, I'm just not.
Hmm.
I'm living the complete opposite way. I'm so focused on money, and like I said, it definitely helped to an extent.
Yeah,
So focused on money, but ultimately that was not what was going to take me to the finish line. Like, who am I going to be remembered for? I was such an asshole to people. Like, I really was. Not because I am an asshole, but because I was so hurt.
because yeah,
I was so damn hurt. So I was just projecting that hurt onto other people, and seeing them feel some type of way about my negative remarks kind of gave me joy, which sounds so messed up,
but
you
true.
know?
I mean, I can completely understand that. Yeah,
Yeah, so those 3 words forever changed the trajectory of where I was heading in life, which is ultimately and graciously how I ended up to where I am today. Thankfully, because I didn't want to go through life being that a-hole
that
anymore.
guy. But I mean, see, there you go, right? I mean, that's that. It not. It doesn't seem like this, like huge aha light. It doesn't, appear like, oh man, like this was this big moment in this lesson. But that
Mm,
was, like you mentioned, like we all have our different moments, and what's a mistake for you may not be a mistake for me. It may be
right.
just oh well, that was just another thing in my day. But for you, it might be, or the lesson there, or whatever quote unquote trouble you're getting in life is completely different. But I think there's always something to be found there. Um, and your choice as to what to do with that moment. And here you are. I mean, we're just talking about, like you said, a simple YouTube video in 3 words, right? Anybody else could be
Absolutely.
like, whatever, like that doesn't happen, but whatever was happening in that moment caused you to pay attention to it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. That led me to realize how selfish I was, meaning always putting myself first. And ultimately, it led me to become a servant, right? So I got my act together, got myself back in school, graduated with a 2 year degree, furthermore, moved on to go get my 4 year, which essentially was, I was on the 7 year plan for a bachelor's degree. I didn't come out with a doctorate. And ultimately, I started to serve because I saw the students that were at my now alma mater. I saw them not have anywhere near the amount of opportunities I've had in my life.
Yeah,
Now, like I said, life, while I was focused for the sake of resignation on low moments, I mean, I played baseball under an MLB champion, a World Series champion. Like, that's an incredible opportunity. I was blessed to work as a business owner from 17 to 24 years old in New York City hospitality. Like, that is an opportunity that not many people get. I
yeah,
was able to pay my way through college because my parents cut me off. Like, blessed with all these opportunities, and I said to myself, like, why are these students like? Why don't they have the same? And we could talk. Being that it was in a not the best of neighborhoods, the school, and where these students were coming from, I said, I want to give them those opportunities.
yeah.
So I started to serve, and my service led me to being blessed with an absolutely incredible opportunity. And that opportunity was meeting Damon John of Shark Tank. He was coming to my college campus. I'll never forget. I was in my quote unquote junior year, on spring break in Dominican Republic, sipping a drink, laying on the beach when I saw my phone light up and it said CUNY York College, City University of New York, York College. And I'm saying to myself, I paid my damn tuition. Why the hell are they calling me? Like, I know I paid it because I paid it myself. And the woman on the other end of the line was like, hey, like, do you want to meet Damon John? And I'm saying to myself, this woman knows me so damn well. She knows the answer is yes. Like, why does she even have to call? But ultimately, I was one of 3 students to meet him. And I was the last person to shake his hand in the green room before he went on stage to do his fireside chat. I shook his hand, he looked at me, and he said, what the hell do they teach you here? Of good vibes off the bat. We had about a 5-minute conversation, and by the end of it, I said, Damon, I'm going to work for you. And this is where the world comes full circle. He looked at me like I had 10 heads. I know I have one really big head, but he looked at me like I had 10. And he went on stage. He did his fireside chat. I had my mentor there with me. Being he wasn't a student, he wasn't allowed to sit with me. So after the event, we met up in the middle of the theater. We were the last 2 people to leave, so we thought. And out of my peripheral vision, I'll never forget, it was out of my left eye, I saw Santa Claus, or at least someone that looked like Santa Claus, walking up the steps to exit the theater. And I said to my mentor, I'm like, this guy looks really familiar. Like, where do we know him from? And no, it's not Christmas. It happened to be a gentleman that we worked with in hospitality. And that's how my life came full circle, because the gentleman that worked with us in hospitality, his name is George, just so happened to work with Damon John. And I was able to turn the service that I was putting forth at this school, changing my whole mindset of currency over legacy to legacy over currency, paid off in that moment because George was able to get me an interview for an internship. And of course, my resume had something to do with it as well.
Sure.
But that interview turned into an internship. That internship turned into a job. That job turned into me being interviewed by Damon for what I'm doing in this world. And ever since, I started to be of service. I built a library here in my local community. During the pandemic, I raised $15,000 to feed frontline workers and support small business here in New York City. I mentor all the time at an entrepreneurship cohort for 24 college institutions, like really being of service. And as are you with your show. And it's an incredible,
Yeah.
it's an incredible shift.
Well, so go back though. So as you talk about this shift, there's one like moment before it there that you were saying that you realize all these people around you and like they don't have these opportunities. You use a phrase though that other people can turn completely and do turn the other way a lot. In that your parents cut you off, you had to pay for everything, and so often, right, we hear people say in a very negative tone, well, my parents cut me off and I had to work for myself to get where I am. And while that sounds so, courageous and difficult, and you do reach this like proud moment, that tone though sets a different precedent for where you get to. You still have that mindset of currency over legacy, as you say. Where do you think your shift was different then, in the sense that you looked at that and go, these are blessings. These are not, the greatest of opportunities. Yes, it's a struggle, and it's emotional struggle that my parents did cut me off. Where do you think the shift happened for you, that you didn't take that negative tone? You looked at it and go, okay, these are opportunities. I don't have to hold that against myself or anybody else.
That is a fantastic question, and I'll be fully transparent. It definitely didn't happen in the moment.
Oh yeah,
I
no.
can't tell you. Yeah, no, it was not in the moment. I'll never forget walking into the I don't remember, the bursar office. Is that what it's called in on a college campus where you pay your tuition? Like,
Yeah.
I remember. Oh, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
What's even more is that I remember that because college was a long time ago.
Right. So I'll never forget walking into this office with a check that was going to take out $5,000 from my checking account or my saving account. Like, I'll never forget that. I had so much anger toward my parents because of that. So it wasn't in the moment.
Sure.
It was years down the road where I realized, like, hey, like, if I decided it was specifically my dad, if I decided when my dad cut me off from paying my tuition to not go back to school, where would I be? I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I would be in a similar place. I don't know. I definitely wouldn't be here. So it took years. And in fact, it brings me to a quote, actually an equation that is shared by someone that I really admire. His name is John Gordon. And by the way, when I say equation, I absolutely suck at math, so it has nothing to do with numbers. I can promise you that. And especially when they brought numbers and letters together in math, I totally checked
Yeah,
out.
I was an
This is
algebra teacher for 10 years, amongst many
oh,
things teaching, and I just found a solace in the fact that, like, you know, I don't like it either, kids. But it does come to some kind of use, so let's bear with me.
absolutely.
So I'm with you on that.
So it's going to come to use here. The equation is rather simple, and you'll see how this connects in a second. It's E plus P equals O, and that stands for events plus perspective equals the outcome. Now, we don't get to control every single event in our life.
Sure,
I didn't get to control, maybe I did get to control my dad cutting me off, because if I didn't fail out, he probably
he would
wouldn't.
have
He
done that.
probably would have
Yeah,
just paid. Yeah, he probably would have paid for it until he realized I was messing around and I wasn't serious. Um, but now I can look back with the perspective that I had to get serious because this was my own money,
yeah,
right? Like I was on my own dime.
yeah,
So while we would love to control, and when I say we, me, would love to control every event that takes place in our life would be pretty dull and boring if that was the
sure,
case, right?
absolutely, right.
Um, so we don't get to control every event, but what we do get to control is our perspective. As alluded to, wasn't, yes, my parents cut me off, this is fantastic for me. It was more like, F them.
Yeah,
Like this, that, like, why are you doing this to me? Is
yeah,
this another form of neglect? Is this another form of rejection? Like, do you not take me serious, et cetera, et cetera? So, all of that in mind, years down the road, I was able to develop a different perspective, which
yeah,
led to a different outcome. But it definitely didn't happen in the moment. I can tell you
sure.
that.
No, absolutely doesn't. But I mean, the fact that it reached that point, you were obviously listening to, you know, the things that were being said along the way, you know, both
Mm.
internally, externally, and I think that's a challenge, I think, for a lot of people to, you know, not get caught up in the external, you know, rewards or the external attention, and ultimately find yourself inside, and the attention you really need comes from within. um
Yeah.
and you know, and gets you to where, you know, not necessarily where you need to be, but probably the more sustainable, um, you know, place to be in the end.
Absolutely. It actually took me years after to start to turn inward. I was, I'll never forget, I was always someone that wanted to read a book outside of school. I just wanted more for myself, but I thought, quote unquote, doing the work on me
Yeah,
was reading the book or going to Tony Robbins events or this, that, and the other. And while those do serve a tremendous purpose, without a doubt, I'm not downplaying them. If you can't meet yourself on a certain level,
yeah,
those tools will not bring you to that level,
sure,
right? And the reason I share this is because this is all taking place in, let's call it 2015, 2016, where, major shifts are taking place. And it wasn't until 2020 when I finally learned to turn inward, right? And I finally learned all of what we're talking about here today. I didn't realize my needs weren't met growing up or that I was numb. I can't tell you before 2020, I can't tell you when I cried before 2020. Like, I literally can't
yeah,
even tell you. But then this is, really where things started to shift, and I was able to, what I like to refer to as, uncover myself versus discover myself. I think discovery
yeah,
was something I was trying to do, but it was, I feel like discovery for me is outside of me.
yeah,
Meanwhile, I think uncovering is exactly what it sounds like.
yeah,
Everything we need is within. Everything I need, everything you need, everything everyone's listening, like everything is within. So we don't need to discover that. We need to uncover that. Like,
yeah,
it's already there. Like, you're not looking for anything. You're just trying to get to those layers. So in June of 2020, I remember it vividly. I said to myself, how am I achieving all that I'm achieving after I made that massive transition in my life? How am I achieving all that I'm achieving? Yet, why do I feel anxious? Why do I feel? Why am I experiencing panic? I never had panic. Where is
yeah,
this all coming from? And in 2020, I was in a relationship with a fantastic woman, great woman, still love her to this day, but she was stroking my core wound. Rejection, neglect, all of it. And I thought that's what love was, because that's what my mother gave me,
Yeah.
right? That's how love was viewed in my eyes at that time. And I said to myself, all right, well, if this is love, I need to work on myself. Like I need to put myself in therapy so this relationship lasts. Like I really thought I was the quote unquote issue here.
Right.
Yeah. And it led me to therapy. 3 sessions, 4 sessions, 5 sessions in, my therapist is like, Matt, are you realizing anything here? And massive uncovering from 2020 on. And that is when I finally started to give myself what I needed, the attention I needed, the self-soothing I needed, the emotional regulation I needed. And I think life reset me in a sense.
Yeah.
With those moments. I had to lose a lot to be able to get to this point.
Sure.
If you're not able to handle something life gives you, life might take it away, and that's what happened to me. Or life won't take it away; you'll blow it away.
You'll blow it away, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what happened, man. But therapy is honestly what drastically changed my life for the better, ultimately, and all of the numbness that I had alluded to, it went from 1992 to 2020.
I
From
was just gonna say,
1992 to
like
2020.
to take a look at that for a second. That when you talk about the work, putting that work in, like even trying to put a number for some people, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'll spend a year on myself, but it's not that you necessarily have to have a broken past or something traumatic happen or thing, but there's all those fragile moments that build up
Mm.
that maybe they're addressed, maybe they're not addressed, but your job is to kind of piece it all together as to, what was being taught, what was being said, what do I need to know about myself that was, in that moment. That, I mean, I can tell you from being a middle school teacher for 10 years and having 2 masters under that we are not put together until we're like 25. Like
Mm.
physically our brains aren't. So of course we're not going to understand what was going on when we were a kid, why you got arrested, why you were in the principal's office. And that's okay, but now, and only figuring that out, and you're okay with that. And again, so I'm going to go back.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you answer that one now too. That, like, how do you see yourself now looking at all those pieces? How are you able to look at it and go, you know what? It's okay that all that happened. This is what I'm going to do with that, versus what seems to be the general, consensus, that they go, oh, well, of course my mom was terrible. And well, of course, because, when I was 5, my dad said he didn't love me. Like, those are the reasons why. Like, how do you not have this like ball of like negative energy and make that push you to the work versus this?
I'll give you the simplest answer, and it ties in directly to this podcast. It gives you a story to tell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Think about it. Like growing up as a kid, and you get a scar. I mean, I used to play in the street all the time, manhunt, wiffle ball, basketball, football, 2-hand touch, tag, red light, green light, all of that. And when you fall down and you scrape your arm, I have a scar on my elbow, it gives you a story to tell.
Yeah.
These things give us a story to tell. In the moment, when I first started to find out, especially in therapy in 2020, and I'm still in therapy, by the way, but when I first started to find out that, the core wound of motherhood, or furthermore, my dad trying to live through me when I was playing sports, like, it really hurt to find that out, and to just become aware of it. It really hurt. Like,
Sure.
I had to face the pain, but now I get it. Like I said earlier, my parents did the best they could do. They don't necessarily see eye to eye with all that I do for myself, because they don't do it for themselves, and that's okay. I actually, I'm going to stop myself there. I'm curious to know your perspective on this, if you don't mind me asking you a question. Um, do you think everyone is meant to heal?
Yeah, I do. What that definition means though for everybody is probably the thing that varies, and the thing that you can't necessarily pin down.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, your traumatic moment in life might not be my version of that. I might look at it and go, really? Like, that's
Mm.
what you're upset about? That's what's been causing you pain for 10? And, you know, like, not to say that I'm like diminishing, but, you know, you might have that internal reaction that, like, that's not a big deal to me. I'll give you an example. So I call, I call it the to-do list. My brother and I are 5 years apart. He's younger. Um, if I ask him to do something, he lives far away now in Nashville, like I said, but if when we lived in the same city, if I asked him to do something, I could tell right away that he was going to say no because he didn't respond very fast. But what was going on in his head was trickling through everything that he had on a to-do list and whether that was
Mm.
causing him worry or not. And the things that were on his to-do list might be something like laundry and dishes, and he hasn't eaten, so he has to go, you know, make lunch, you know, all these, like, I'm going to say little things, because on the reverse side, for me, those aren't on my to-do list. Those are things that just happen in a day. So I'm not worried about those. You know, this is before 2 kids. So, you know, I might be worried that my car, I have to go bring it in for an oil change. So a little bit bigger, you know, kind of planning that out. But I think there's two people that they overwhelmed by small things like doing laundry in a day, or they're not. And that's either one, either person is fine. And it's just, it's an awareness of like what they need
Mm.
to move forward. So it's the same thing with whatever your life experiences. Take that on a bigger scale. That for you, you might need this large conversation for, you know, something seemingly minor in your life, whereas somebody else might. But and your healing might be because of that event, you know, whereas somebody else's healing might not be just one event, it's a multitude of events. And you know what that looks like at the end of the healing process, whenever that is, you know, you might, you know, be in complete nirvana and nothing matters to you
Mm.
anymore, and you can sit in the Tibetan temple for the rest of your life and be okay with it. And some people, it's like, okay, I can at least wake up every day. You know, I think there's different versions of healing, but no, I think everybody can. Now, does everybody want to heal is probably the better question.
That's what I'm getting at, right? So I asked if everyone is meant to heal, and in this lifetime, without getting super metaphysical, because that's not necessarily my jam, I personally don't think so. Does everyone have the capability to heal? I say
Sure.
yes,
Sure.
right? I think that's what we're aligned in that regard. But no, I ask because, you know, ultimately, like, we have people in our life. I was just alluding to my parents. I just saw my dad in the gym this morning, and he said, "You know what? I think you might have got your anxiety from me," which I don't necessarily know how true that is, but he was like, my dad's 63. This is the first time he's ever brought this up to me, and he literally said that, and I'm like, Dad, like, you know, he was at an event on Sunday, and he was like, I started getting really really antsy. I don't get like that. And I'm like, well, you're 63, dude. Like, wake up. Like, where has this popped up in your life? You know? So, um, yeah, I mean, you know, and I see it in my mother too. Just, you
Yeah.
know, so much anger from everything she's experienced, so much hurt. But I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if they'll ever pursue some inner
Yeah.
work where they turn inward. Can they?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Sure.
have access to it, but
Yeah.
you know,
You
that's
have
why I
to
asked
want
that
to
question.
too, right? I mean,
You have
and
to
maybe
want to.
you know, you kind of look at it as age as the easy way to see it, that, you know, you get to a certain point in life, you're just like, you know, this is like, there's no point in this. Like, you know, I like, what is that going to do for me? So you can certainly see how that, but that can happen at any time in life, you know, that
Yeah,
I don't want to do this. Like, this is too hard.
yeah,
And you have to kind of, I don't know, be okay with it necessarily, but you kind of have to just embrace that person where they're at, because, you know, like I said, I mean, the universe is going to talk to you. That you have to be
yeah.
the one that ultimately listens. So yeah, I think everybody's absolutely capable, but do we want to? Are we ready to? Maybe it's the best way to, not necessarily want to. Are you ready to? And your readiness may not come until you're, you know, 70 or 90 when you're on your deathbed. Like, okay, hold on, like, I
100%.
got some things that I want to apologize for.
That
No.
you just hit the nail on the head. I thought about that literally, I want to say this week, you know, I literally thought about it because my mother and I, we don't have the best relationship. Are we civil? Of course, you know, but we don't necessarily, we don't have, we have no depth. That's the
Yeah.
best way to put it, right? Like, we have no depth. And I said to myself, I'm a very vivid, imaginative individual. Like no matter what it is, like I can close
Yeah.
my eyes. The other day, I blinked in conversation just like this, and I saw a vivid image of me opening a car door for my wife and daughter, which I have neither, but I saw it. Like I literally saw the pavers in the driveway and like where we were. Like I saw all of
Yeah.
that. So the other night, like I said, I don't know if this was yesterday or the day before. I literally blinked, saw my mother, in her final days and her opening up finally and saying,
Yeah.
"Sorry, I projected the hurt of the divorce and the image of your father onto you," which she's openly admitted that before in arguments. So yeah, I mean, some people
Yeah.
just, and again, not to be metaphysical here, whether people believe this or not, I don't know if I do. I was born Catholic, so we're taught not to believe in
Yep.
numerous lifetimes. But I feel like if our souls do travel, you're going to show back up in another form of some sort until you learn the lessons,
Yeah. Oh,
right? So
absolutely. I mean, and a lot of, I mean, you get into, all the different details of that, there's a generation that didn't talk about it there, and our generation is different. And, my family dynamic is similar. I mean, I was raised Catholic, but we also, going through the years here, I mean, we have that different belief of things, but I have these conversations every day, with people, but then I can see it already. I have a 2-year-old and an 8-month-old, and I look at it as not challenging moments and frustrating moments. It's like, okay, what am I being told to talk? That guy has,
mm,
he's 2. He has no idea what's going on, right? It's my job to do that. But that's different for a lot of people, and it's the same thing just from like, adult to their parent, you can take the route of being frustrated because they don't get you, or you don't have this relationship, or you can try and see where and why and how they got to that. I can't talk to them about this.
yeah,
And, I mean, and that's hard. I mean, that's a lot of probably where the disconnect is at the moment when it comes to mental health issues, is that you're forgetting there's the whole generation thing. I see, every time I see it in the news, or this famous person said this, or this belief and that, I'm going to go off on a rant and we'll just cut it out.
don't cut it out.
I
Come on,
just,
this
I
is
just, I
organic
just was
convo.
talking to my brother the other day. Like, another article came up about J.K. Rowling and her. I don't know if you follow like her.
I'm not familiar. No, no,
So
no.
she's the
I
author of.
know of her.
Okay.
Yes, that yeah.
She has, and I have no idea, because I don't even want to get into those details of what the transgender issue is, where it's coming from, and what she said, and what. But you can see it, and every time it pops up, that does she mean any ill will with what she's saying? I don't think so, but I don't think I've yet to see anybody say, you know what? She comes from a different generation of beliefs and values and understanding. Is she going to ever accept that, this is what defines a woman versus, how we look at it? Maybe not, but you've got to admit that somewhere in there, it's got to be confusing for somebody that grew up in this way to see it now. I do. I look at our kids, and like, I look back that we taught, like I said, for 10 years, we were Montessori middle school teachers, and Montessori philosophy is all about just like understanding, the life skills of everything. And there was constant
Mm,
conversations about what was in the news. And anytime I see these conversations about pronouns and transgenders and all these different things, I don't know how I would have those conversations with a middle schooler today if I were teaching. But I have 2 little ones that I'm going to have that conversation with. And nobody's having those conversations in an educational way. And I think that's what's happening with mental health, that we've done all this work about awareness. Now we have to do the education part of it, because otherwise we're just going to get stuck, and you're going to get mad at people and cancel them or call them this name and that name. And maybe they are an asshole. Maybe they just don't get it. And that's, like you said, some people just don't want to heal past it. But
yeah.
I see things like that's just the easiest. Mean ill will, maybe, but are we also giving them a chance to say, look, I don't go by him. I'm offended by that, but here's why. It's even for me. I'm like, I tell myself I'm the nicest person you'll never meet, because no one's going to give me necessarily the chance. When I walk around without full, coverings here, I'm this 6'1", built tattooed guy. You don't want to talk to me. I'm surely gonna be a jerk to you and not hold the door, but I am that nice guy, right? And so that's kind of the perspective I take. And so even I'm worried when I go out, and I'm very quick. I don't know how I picked up on the Southern hospitalities of things, but I'm the first person that's going to be, say thank you, ma'am, or no problem, sir, or some term of pronoun, and I'm just waiting for someone to get mad at me for like it's not,
Yeah,
you don't wear that badge. And so I say the same thing. It's the same conversation I have with mental health. It's like you can't get mad at somebody for that. Like you have to help them see what you're trying to see. There's where these stories come
absolutely.
from. Is like, how do we help them get to that point? And some parents want to have that conversation with their children, vice versa. And some of us just go, yeah, you don't get me and you never will. And then it just,
Yeah.
so yeah.
No, I get it. I think, just from this conversation alone, I think what the world needs more is to revert back to something that we were all born out of. Every single one of us was born out of love,
Yeah. Somewhere, right?
and yeah, I had a conversation with Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her.
No, no,
She
no.
has one of the most watched TED Talks ever. And long story short, she essentially died and then came back to life. Like she was pronounced dead in the hospital and then
Whew.
came back to life. And she said something so powerful to me. She said in its simplest form, the meaning of life is love. But why have we strayed away from that? Like, why have we strayed away
Yeah.
from love? And ultimately, it comes down to, all of the feelings that are on the surface, the
Yeah.
anger, the fear, the this, the that, and projecting those outward. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone's actually I don't think anyone actually has ill intention, but it goes back to what you were saying. Like, we have a lack of understanding,
Yeah.
and that lack of understanding can,
It's pushing us away from, yeah.
it could cause a storm,
Yeah.
so ultimately though I think the answer is love. Do I think we get there? Potentially not in our lifetime,
Yeah.
but hopefully, hopefully we have a rise of some really influential leaders that could bring us back
Yeah.
to, throughout the entire globe, the next Mother Teresa or whomever. I don't know,
Yeah.
whoever people view as leaders, but love is the answer, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, man, for telling me this story.
Absolutely.